Hey, I'm Randy, and you're watching The Cheap Audio Man. Here at The Cheap Audio Man, we help everyone find high-value hi-fi home theater and headphone equipment. And today, we're talking about the Rotel A11 Tribute. It's an integrated amplifier. So grab a cup of coffee, sit down, and let's talk about the Rotel A11 Tribute integrated amplifier. Okay, the Rotel A11 Tribute, what is it? It is an $800 integrated amplifier. Why the Tribute? Well, that's for Ken Ishiwata, and he was a Japanese engineer that had worked on this design before he passed away. He'd been in the industry for 40 plus years. When Rotel had this ready to release to the market, they asked his family, can we call it the Tribute for Ken? And they agreed. There's a very nice badge on here that has some Japanese writing next to it. And I think it's a very nice touch. You know, amplifiers just look like a generic box, and something like this is pretty cool. So this piece of equipment still differentiates itself just with this Tribute badge, and it maybe means a lot to some people. Personally, I think it's pretty cool. On the front, it's a very nice brushed aluminum faceplate. On the left is a very heavy-duty power switch, so you can really hear it when you engage it. Engage. Headphone output, right next to that, 3.5 millimeter. Thing you need to know about it is it's party mode, because the speakers will still play if you have your headphones attached to it, but you can turn the speakers off because those buttons are right next to it. There are speaker A and speaker B, and you can play speaker A and speaker B at the same time. And the power rating, which is 50 watts per channel into an 8 ohm speaker or 8 ohm load, that power is rated for all channels driven. So 4 channels driven. Now, the power rating is rated at 8 ohms. There is no posted power rating for a 4 ohm speaker. I did try the ELAC Unify, the first generation, which has a 4 ohm rating, but that thing really dips down below there. And it's very inefficient too. So generally with that speaker, one needs a lot of power. Now, the A11 did drive them. Did it drive them as well as I've heard? No, but amps that I used that I felt like I got the full potential were all north of 100, and some even higher than that. I think the A11 did just fine with the ELACs. At 50 watts, there are better amps for that speaker, but that's also my hardest to drive speaker I have, and it's really the speaker that it's not a torture test per se, but it's when I have a 50 watt amp or something lower, I'll put those speakers on there just to see how well it does. This did fine with them, which tells me that it's going to do great with pretty much any other speaker out there, unless it's super low efficiency and super low impedance. Since there's no 4 ohm rating on here, I don't particularly know what you're getting out of it. But I read somewhere that if you're going to drive 4 ohm speakers on here, just don't drive 4 ohm speakers on here. Drive 2. If you're just driving 2, using this in a 2-channel situation, I don't think it's going to matter regardless of what the, well, don't go 4. Don't go below 4, okay? But this is going to do just fine with 4 ohm speakers. Next to the speaker actuator selector buttons, and they feel very solid. Okay, this thing is built very, very, very well. It's actually built better than some things that I've had in that are more expensive. So really nice switches right here. Underneath that, you have phono, tuner, CD, auxiliary, and Bluetooth. And then above that is a very usable display. If you don't like how bright the display is, it's okay, because you can dim that down if you want to. And then next to that, there's a menu. So if you want to get into the tone controls or the boost. Boost is like a loudness function, okay? So the A11 Tribute has a loudness button. Not only that, it has a super loudness button. They don't call it the loudness button, but it works like a loudness button. So they have 2 levels of a loudness button, a low and a high. Party and extra party mode. And then, so you'll get into that right here with the menu, plus and minus. If you want to run tone controls, you won't be able to use the loudness. So you can't use the loudness and the tone controls at the same time. You can also bypass everything and just run it straight through. And then next to that is a very nice volume knob. It's made out of metal, it looks good, and it has a very smooth actuation. And then on the top here, there is ventilation holes, oh my goodness, across the entire thing. And I never really felt like this thing got super hot, even when I was pushing it pretty hard. But it's nice to have the ventilation holes. On the back, left to right, you have the grounding post for the phono stage. So this comes with an integrated phono preamp for moving magnet cartridges. Then next to that you have the CD input, but again, you can hook up whatever you want. It doesn't need to be a CD player. Tuner, auxiliary 1, auxiliary 2. You have a Bluetooth module up here right next to that, and that Bluetooth is aptX. So if you have AAC, you're still going to get good sound out of it because the Bluetooth does sound good. However, with aptX, with SBC codecs, you're not going to hear all of the resolution out of the music. But I would argue this amp is very clean. We'll get into that a little bit more in the sound portion. So even though you're not getting a great, perfect codec that can transport the most amount of data, you're still probably going to hear more out of your Bluetooth because this thing is so clean. Next to that, very exciting preamp outputs, okay? So two things you can use this for. One, you can hook up a subwoofer with it, all right? Two, you can hook up another amplifier to it. So you can get this and then it can grow with you. And if you want to hook up both, you can just split the RCAs. I know some people probably would be, oh, you can't do that. Yes, you can. You can split the RCAs, run one to a subwoofer, run one to your power amplifier, or you can use a subwoofer that has speaker level inputs too. All right, so there's a variety of ways you can hook up a subwoofer if you want to this thing. But more importantly, the preamp outs are awesome because you can, after you get this later on in your journey, if you have some really hard to drive speakers, you can hook up a power amplifier that has a little more juice. Next to that, you have a trigger in, a trigger out, external remote. I don't really know what that's for. If you do, drop it in the comments. RS232 input. Okay. And then you have your speaker A and then your speaker B. Very nice binding post. Everything's very solid. This thing is built very, very, very well. I have no complaints about the build quality of this. It's very good. Also, comes with a remote control. This is, I wouldn't say like the best remote control on the planet. It's not made out of machined aluminum or anything. It's very nice, good size, probably not going to lose this. So it's a good solid remote. Got a good balance to it. Good balanced remote control. All right, how's it sound? Well, I think it sounds really good. Oops, I would describe the sound as being clean and unaltered in any way. So it's not really boosted in the bass, doesn't focus on the treble. It is very neutral. And if I had to compare it to an amp or say it's most similar to the amps that I have here in the house, it would be the Akatika GT102 and the PT102 acting as a preamp. That combination is very clean and very neutral. So this doesn't have the personality per se that an Emotiva TA1 or a PT1 and an A2 would have. It is a, this is an audiophile amplifier. And a lack of a personality doesn't mean it's not as good. Frankly, this amplifier is going to appeal to just about anybody that's getting into hi-fi or has been in hi-fi and wants to get a very solid two-channel integrated amplifier. Because it's neutral, because it has tone controls, because it has party and extra party mode, you can get just about any type of sound you want out of this within reason. The mid-range, I don't think you're going to be able to really butter that up. But to be fair, the only amps that really do a great job with mid-range butter are usually vintage. Some of the Marantz stuff has kind of a buttery sound. Some of the Denon PMA 600NE, 800NE have that buttery nature, but they don't have any of the detail. This thing is way more detailed than those Denons are. No DAC in this. So if you want to listen to digital music, you're going to have to hook up a DAC. I used 2 DACs when I tested this out. Of course, my Gashelli Labs J2, one of my favorite DACs that I have. This comes in at $250 without a USB, $300 with a USB. The Schit Modi multi-bit, you can't really get this right now. It's not shipping until December again. This is $250. I think this will also match well with the regular Modi, which comes in, I think, at $130. I thought the best pairing was the Gashelli Labs J2. This has a warmer presentation with digital music, so coupling it with a very neutral, clean sounding amplifier was quite nice. The speaker that spent the most time on here was the Polk R100s, kind of my reference speaker in the near field. Also brought this upstairs, hooked up the Wharfdale Lintons. Good combination. They're all good combinations. Also tried out the Q Acoustics Model 30, which is a higher end bookshelf speaker. That's about a $1,300 bookshelf speaker. Also hooked up the much more affordable ELAC BS41s. This did great on all of them, but it's still, the speaker is going to maintain the characteristics that it has going in because this is such a neutral amp. You can start to change the sonics with the DAC that's a little bit more smoother. This amplifier though is, and I hate the term getting out of the way, just gets out of the way to the music, but it kind of does. There's enough tweaking you can do with the sound that you can get it to be, I think, where most people are going to want it. I would not call this amplifier smooth, not at all. But I also would not call this amplifier harsh, not at all. It's not too forward. It doesn't concentrate on the treble. It's not U-shaped. Very clean. I'll link it in the description, of course. You can take a look at the design philosophy, the choices that they made, but they are more minimalist when it comes to the signal path. They try to keep it as short as possible. There's some other considerations that they put into their designs. So if you want to check that out, you can. But the takeaway is it sounds really good. It sounds very clean. The only direct A/B comparison I did with this was with the Akatika. And the reason why is I don't have those integrated amplifiers anymore. From memory, the NAD C338, which comes in at a similar price point, has more features, has a DAC, but the Rotel A11 sounds much more natural, much more organic. If you're getting any value out of this video, you may want to consider subscribing. And if you're so kind, like the video. You may want to subscribe simply because I post a lot of community posts with current sales. And those sales are always when a product is as low as I think it's going to get for this year. You never know what prices are going to do later. But if you turn on bell notifications, you'll see when all my community posts go up and you'll see the sales. And if it's something you're interested in, well, then you're going to get it at the best price you're going to get it at. And some of those sales, well, they sell out because some of them are discontinued items. So please consider subscribing. Okay, comparisons in the same price range. The one that I just had in was the NAD or NAD C338. That's a Class D amplifier or integrated amplifier. Also has a DAC. Also has some streaming capabilities. Sound-wise, the A11 is way more neutral, and the NAD had a tendency to be a bit harsh. The C338 did have a bass boost, but I didn't feel like it was, well, I didn't feel like it was implemented very well. And it just didn't sound natural. It just sounded like a bass boost. Not well done. Loudness button on here, or the loudness options on here, are well done. And you can choose from one or two. Then you also have the tone controls. This is more organic sounding than the NAD C338. Emotiva TA1 has a lot more features in it, has a DAC, has a phono input. This one has a phono input, has multiple ways to do bass management. I love the TA1, but it's not nearly as clean as the A11. You're going to hear a lot more detail through the A11. Now, the A11 is more neutral. The TA1 has more personality and is a kind of a sound signature that I gravitate towards because it's punchy and sparkly. It's U-shaped. This is neutral. At $800, even though this doesn't have a DAC, I think it's still worth the asking price. I think this is still a value because the phono stage coupled with the amplifier has a, I tried it with a RT85 and the combination sounded very similar to me as when I had the iFi Zen phono hooked up to the Akatika. And that all in came around, I don't know, $1,300. I think the internal phono preamp in the A11 is as good as the iFi Zen phono. Now, this internal phono preamp can't do moving cartridge. It doesn't really have variable adjustment. What you get is what you get. But what you do get is very clean phono preamplification going into a very clean amp. So detail retrieval is great. Noise floor is super low. This doesn't have nearly the amount of features that the iFi Zen phono does, but it sounds similar. It also sounds awful similar to the Project S1 Phonobox S1 or S2 Ultra. Yes, that's it. Phonobox S2 Ultra, which is an all discrete type of, I don't know, design. This one sounded similar to that, and that's $350. So let's take that into consideration. Let's say this internally has a $200 phono preamp. That drops the price of the integrated amplifier down to $600. And I think this is worth way more than $600. I think the phono preamp in here sounds like a $200 phono preamp. You're gonna need a DAC if you're going to stream or if you're gonna pull something in from your computer or if you have a CD transport. However, you don't need some crazy expensive DAC. You could get a Modi for $100. You could get the J2 from Gashelli for $250. And for around $1,000, you are going to have a system that is probably about as clean as you can get. There are more options on the Parasound integrated amplifier. I just did. It has more options. I like the sound of this one better. I really like the sound of this amplifier. I think it is... You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of the Moon by Sim Audio 240i. That's the sound that I kind of get. That's the vibe I get. That's a $3,300 integrated amplifier. I'd rather have this for $800 and then buy some speakers and buy a whole bunch of other stuff. That's what this reminds me of, and it just occurred to me. One thing about this amp is the volume span or how you turn it up. One of my patrons just got this and he mentioned it on one of the Zoom calls. And I had the same experience. And that's having to turn it up a little bit farther than you really think you would. I don't think there's nothing wrong with the amplifier. I think what it is the type of volume pot that they added. Some volume knobs change the gain slowly, some change the gain more quickly. The volume knobs that adjust more slowly are better for fine tuning. So I was really able to max this volume out without having any distortion, and that's pretty good. I think 0.0 something is the distortion at the rated power, and whenever you have a point and then a zero, pretty clean amplifier. Anyway, if you do get this, you may notice that you need to get up into the 60s or maybe even the 70s to get a level that is loud enough for you, but it is nothing to do with the amp. I think it's just the choice they used for the volume pot. I think the A11 is great. I don't think it's going to offend anybody. It's very clean. If you want something warmer, if you want something with more butter, you could look at some of the Denons, but it's not going to be nearly as clean as this thing. If you want something punchier, a little bit of U-shaped, you can look at the Emotivas. But again, you're not going to have the level of clarity that you're going to have through this. So I don't think you can go wrong with the A11 from Rotel. It's a beautiful amplifier. So if you want to support the channel, you can sign up for Patreon, patreon.com/cheapaudioman. Every Sunday night we have Patreon-only Zooms. We also have a Patreon-only Facebook group and a Patreon-only Discord server. You can also buy the A11 through my links. That is an affiliate link. If you purchase it through those links, I will get a commission. You can also sign up for Amazon Music or Tidal Music. Even if you sign up for a trial, I get a couple of dollars. So don't binge watch anything on Netflix or Hulu. Binge listen, maybe through your new Rotel A11 Tribute, and fill your soul with happiness. And with that, I'm Randy. I'm the Cheap Audio Man.